I won't lie to you. Doing this series has given me so much hope and something to focus on when I needed to focus on something. And the stories from people on this series have just been, I've been lucky in the sense that I'm asking the questions, and so I'm silent most of the time. But I won't lie to you. I've cried and I've got upset, and I've been glad that I haven't been the one talking at that time. It's been so raw and real.
This is Deep in the Weeds, and I'm Dani Valent. This is the first time that you've heard me introduce this podcast because I've stolen it from Anthony Huckstep, who started Deep in the Weeds just a couple of months ago and has rolled along with 25 episodes. I was, I think, on episode 11 or 12, somewhere in the middle there. And Anthony's asked me to come back and interview him for the final episode of Series 1. There's the final episode of Series 1 because there is going to be a Series 2, because we're certainly not out of the woods. So, Huck, he's a food writer, a food communicator, one of Australia's best known and most respected food journalists. And it's been amazing to hear him interview some of the Australian food industry's most interesting, most expressive, and I guess most thoughtful players over the past couple of months. But it is definitely time to turn the tables and dig into what's been motivating him, how he's been feeling, and where he thinks things might be going. So, Huck, welcome to your own podcast.
Wow, it's weird. Dani, I've never been so nervous, I think, in my life. This morning I've just not been able to concentrate. I've usually got my hands on the wheel of this thing and the safety of that. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm sure it's going to be fun.
Well, I hope it is. So, yeah, it's pretty exciting to have my hands on the wheel. I have to say I'm a fan of the podcast, and when you asked me to go on it, I was really honoured and delighted. And, so when you asked me to interview you, it really means a lot. So thank you for trusting me. I hope your trust isn't misplaced.
Oh, I doubt it will be. And you were brilliant, and we had a great chat. And it was just an immediate response. It was obvious. My wife actually suggested this idea. I certainly didn't put myself forward to be interviewed, but I think I don't think there's anyone that could have done it other than you, given what you've been doing, and also what Rob and I have been doing in the sort of journalism space, void of having actual jobs ourselves.
Yes, well, in some ways we're wandering the woods together in that regard. So, Huck, you've started this podcast most times by asking people to talk about how the pandemic snuck up on them. So I would love you to share your experience. How did it all roll out for you?
Yeah, wow, that just gave me a little bit of a shiver, because it's quite confronting, that question, isn't it? And to receive it is different to ask it. That week that sort of everything changed pretty dramatically, and the restaurant industry collapsed, where all of the restrictions changed quite rapidly from day to day. And, by Sunday on the 23rd, basically restaurants were closed, apart from takeaway. That actual week for me was good and bad. It was a really weird week. That week, within a matter of 24 hours or 48 hours, I pretty much lost all of my work, which is not ideal when you're a father and, you've got to provide for your family. Having said that, I wrote an article about what was happening for Delicious Magazine and the impact that it was having on the industry. And the response that I received from that article, it put things career-wise in perspective.
Tell me what you mean. What stuff was in your article?
Well, it was kind of so to give some context for people, I spent a lot of my career as editor of a food journal, which was for industry, writing about producers and chefs. And so I do have quite a strong connection with the industry in that sense. And then I moved to the dark side to be a critic and a lot of my journalism was for consumers. And I guess when that happened, so many people in the industry reached out to me. It almost felt like, they were pushing me to be a voice. The response was so strong. Kind of like when you're in school and you're about to do PE and play soccer, and no one really wants to be the captain, and some idiot at the back pushes you in the back and you get pushed forward, and the teacher says, "Okay, so it's you." And it was that sort of feeling, like this big push from behind. And it wasn't that I was unwilling, though. It felt like I could do something. And I guess in a way, eventually Rob and I did. And the journey of the podcast has been extraordinary.
What is that feeling like when you're pushed? You're not. It wasn't something that you strategized or pre-planned. So you find yourself in a role. What does that feel like?
I actually needed it, I think, and I've loved it, and I guess I've always thought that I've had a stronger connection to the industry than perhaps a lot of food media, and I guess my career has been a bit different in that context. And I guess to sort of paint a picture, that this pandemic for me personally, and the way that it feels, and I know it's catastrophic on the planet, and the industry has fallen apart, and I've been trying to get work, and and thankfully I have just recently, but it's actually been fairly easy for us in just personally, our family. We live in Canberra, and that's, there's only been 107 cases or something. And so you certainly don't feel the pandemic like you do in Sydney or Melbourne, and certainly not obviously in like Italy or Spain or the US, and what's going on over there. And for us more recently, the bushfires actually we felt that a lot more as a family. And we have two young children, twins, and they're 2 years old. And for us, the bushfires, I think Canberra, there was a 7-day period that Canberra had the worst air quality on the planet for like 4 of that 7 days. And for us, that was a lot more frightening, just as a personal journey as a family. And I mean, I should probably give context to that. And it's not really something that I've ever spoken publicly about, but our daughters are pretty amazing, but they have chronic lung disorder, so air quality is an issue when it's an issue for everyone, which was during the bushfires. So that was kind of tense for us, and the reason they have that, I mean, they're actually healthy, normal children, but they arrived pretty early in the scheme of things, and 3 years ago, our lives sort of changed. They arrived at 26 weeks and were very, very small, and spent 4 months in hospital at the beginning of their lives. And obviously we spent that time with them. And, I think of the situation that we're in now, and, it feels easy compared to the sort of trauma that we went through back then.
Yeah, well, adversity always changes you. And I mean, nothing, well, I won't say nothing, but certainly becoming a parent is life-changing no matter what the circumstances. But it sounds like the way that you fell or leapt or were dragged into it was different to how you might have imagined it was going to be. And I think the bushfires and the smoke, for me, that powerlessness that I felt as a parent, where it's like, you mean I can't guarantee that my kids have got clean air to breathe? Like its breathing is so fundamental, and that would be that basic way of protecting or enabling life was we were cut off from that for a while. And I know it was much worse in Canberra than it was in Melbourne. So yeah, that's very confronting. So, and I think I did feel a little bit the same with with pandemic here, where you just feel like your kids can't go out, they can't see their friends, they can't touch anything. And I think my kids are teenagers, so they like roaming around. I guess 2-year-olds at least, they allow you to circumscribe their world to a greater degree. But it's super confronting.
Well, yeah, and I guess to give context to sort of now, I think, I didn't know I was going to bring what I have. I'll bring it up today, but to give context, the last 3 years, the clarity of what's important in life has never been more evident in our lives. So, without sort of going back over that sort of story with what happened with our family, we actually, during that process, realized pretty quickly, and my wife is like an incredibly strong woman. She's amazing. We realized that when you're dealing with trauma, you can't let the what ifs get to you. So if you deal with the immediacy of the issue and that day is an okay day, then it's an okay day. If you let what ifs, because what ifs actually most of the time never happen. And so you sort of realize soon enough who matters and what matters, and just dealing with what's actually in front of you. And when you deal with what's in front of you, the challenge doesn't seem as big and the support seems bigger than you thought. So I guess, to give, that first week, the first time I left the hospital was to interview Gordon Ramsay, and I still remember getting in that cab, and the cabbie had Jackie O and Kyle Sandilands on. And I remember just sitting there thinking, why do people listen to this bullshit? It's just rubbish, not that we don't need some inane sort of stuff to, help us get by. But just in the context of that scenario, I just felt, we let ourselves sort of get caught up in just silliness like gossip and celebrity gossip and all this sort of stuff.
Well, I guess what you're talking about is it's perspective, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, and the reason that I did go and interview Ramsay is because a year earlier, while I was in the air flying over to the UK to interview him for something else, his family had a personal situation where his wife had a miscarriage, and he cancelled all media, but he still caught up with me, and we had the chat, and we've known each other for a few years, and so I felt sort of obliged to do that. And funnily enough, when I got there to interview him, he's got twins and they were born early, and we actually had a coffee and a chat for 20 minutes before we did any of the sort of formal media sort of stuff. And that really sort of was nice for me to sort of have someone that had experienced something such early on in that for us. But in the context of this pandemic, in that time I was going to review restaurants, sitting there, does it really matter that the waiter's forgotten my water, or that there's a stain on this menu, or that this chicken's slightly overcooked when, I've got my daughters in hospital? And it really put a different perspective on my career as a food critic and journalist. And since then, I've always had question marks over my role in the food media and the changing landscape of food media in Australia. And certainly when this pandemic happened, it was a chance to perhaps go down the track that I think it needs to.
So is that track a bit more where people are standing shoulder to shoulder and looking out across a landscape than facing off?
Yeah, I think there's that. I think there's definitely that. And look, both of us have great friends in food media, and they're wonderful people, and they're just carving out careers. And, but I think the discussion in food, and certainly journalism, has changed so much that, I don't know how many, I've been guilty of it. I don't know if I can write another article about the top 5 milkshakes with a fucking donut on top, like that sort of food media is just really fucking depressing. My greatest joy is to go on a prawn boat for 24 hours and then try and tell that story, or, spend some time in the kitchen with a team and see what actually goes on behind the scenes and how they deliver the magic in a restaurant, or, the stories of people, and is far more interesting to me than you know, how many good hot dogs Sydney has or something.
Well, I think as a writer, what I try to do is you really listen to someone's story, or you observe someone living their story, and you try to honor it and express it in a way that they see themselves reflected. Like it's a real honesty, and a sort of a sparse honesty where you just use the words that you really need to say it. And I think, you give each word its weight and let the story just unfurl. And I think, it's different. It's, I guess, to try to honor someone in that way, or someone's story, or, even a piece of produce, or the project of a restaurant, I just think you don't feel it as much if you're on high, if you've got that old school critic perspective. I think, this is maybe.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really hard. It's a challenge, isn't it, to actually honor their story? Like I know, like we've spoken about it, like you just get, like, people's stories are extraordinary and we don't hear about them, and trying to put that onto paper in, 500 words or 1,000 words feels like you're dishonoring them sometimes because their story is so amazing.
Yeah. But sometimes it's just about finding that thread, or that glimmer that you can speak of or speak to in a really economical way.
Absolutely.
And I guess just be really humble about it. And it's very interesting. The old school critic mindset or posture, I think, is it was shaky, but I feel like this pandemic has just really just given the old statue a bit of a push, and it's crumbled down, and we can rebuild it somehow differently, and we can rebuild it together.
Well, yeah, I'm still trying to put the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together of what I'm going to do on the other side of this. I mean, I won't lie to you. Doing this series has given me so much hope and so something to focus on when I needed to focus on something. And the stories from people on this series have just been, I've been lucky in the sense that I'm asking the questions, and so I'm silent most of the time. But I won't lie to you. I've cried and I've got upset, and I've been glad that I haven't been the one talking at that time. It's been so raw and real.
Well, I think why it's been so powerful, it's resonated so much with people because you've given people that space, and you've just, and you've been in it. Like I think anyone that's listened could feel your empathy, and that you're helping shepherd people through their stories. It's not there's no interrogation, and there's no, I guess you weren't trying to be objective. You were just giving people space to tell their stories.
Yeah, and
Has it been a burden for you to hear all that? Like, people have gone through super hard times, and there's so much uncertainty and bewilderment. Has that been hard for you to carry?
No, it's been emotional, but it hasn't been hard to carry. It's been a joy to carry, and I don't know, that's a weird word to use, but I've had friends reach out to me and say the same things. Like, are you actually, you're doing amazing things and letting people tell their stories, but are you looking after yourself? And, and that's very appreciated from great friends, because we all need that sort of stuff. But I haven't felt a burden. I've been energized. I've been wanting to hear the stories. Like, I listen to these podcasts. I don't like listening to my own voice, but I take the dogs for a walk and I listen to episodes and I re-listen to them because people just give me so much hope and have filled something quite nourishing in my soul that, made me realize what my connection is to the industry, how deep it is, and how amazing it is. We've got an extraordinary food industry here, and the people within it are in a shitstorm, and it isn't going to get easier for a while. It's going to be hard, but there is there's a chance to make that industry better. I mean, there's a chance to make the food media industry better as well, and just generally our lives better if we're all willing. After the break, well, actually, I have no idea what's after the break because Dani hasn't asked me a question yet. This episode of the Deep in the Weeds podcast is brought to you by Piece of Eden Riesling from the St John's Road Winery in the Barossa Valley.
Once you've met the people, met the growers, met the winemakers, you see a sort of common thread among the place, and there's that community and the resilience of the growers and the courage of the growers, and then we all strive for a bit of a relaxing time. To go up to Eden Valley is always nice to look out up on top of Mengler's Hill and look out over the Barossa as the sun goes down is pretty special.
That's James Leanett, winemaker of St John's Road Winery in the Barossa Valley, who also told us about the origins of Piece of Eden.
Piece of Eden refers obviously to the Eden Valley, which is a little bit of a paradise up there. It's very quiet and peaceful and serene. It rains a bit more up there, so we like to think of it as things happen a little slower up there. Everything takes its time, and the Riesling really works well up there. It's on nice granite soil, and so it develops these beautiful citrusy characters with a nice clean acidity. Yeah, a really nice delicate style Riesling from the Eden Valley.
Piece of Eden from St John's Road Winery in the Barossa Valley. For more information, go to stjohnsroad.com.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. What do you think is so great about our food industry?
I guess I view it as that, we're kind of a microcosm of the whole globe, in the sense that Australia, apart from our Indigenous community, which, I think we still need to fully embrace and understand. And I think from a society perspective, we just can't seem to get our heads around that, which is frustrating. Everyone has come from somewhere else in some way, whether it's this generation, the previous generation, the one before it. We've all got long histories as migrants, and our food culture is represented by that. You can see the waves of migration patterns influencing the cuisines that come to fruition in this country. Excuse me. And it's just bloody amazing, and it, like, you can eat, like, the produce here is extraordinary. Our producers are extraordinary. The standards that they set and the standards that they're obliged to set, both from a sustainability perspective and also culinary and quality perspective, is amazing. And it just annoys the hell out of me that a government can, reject, international workers on visas when, they make up a large proportion of our population. They're paying taxes. They're contributing. They're enhancing our culinary landscape. And, we're all bloody migrants, like, and to think otherwise is just ludicrous, and I just, when the industry opens up again, we talk about skills shortages before this. Like, if we don't have those workers, it's going to be even tougher for the industry. And I guess, previously to having children, I've traveled quite a lot for my job overseas and eaten in amazing countries, but gee, it's nice to come home and realize how good our restaurants are.
Yeah, I think it is pretty special here, and we're going to have a really good chance to appreciate it, aren't we? Because we're not going to be traveling elsewhere for a while. So it's good that it's good.
That is true. That's a bloody good argument to get out there and support them, isn't it?
Totally, yeah. So what about the food media? Like, what can you see? How would you describe the way it's been and the way you think that it might change?
Well, I guess there's a couple of aspects to it. One is that media in general, took a pretty big hit in the last decade, and it's been difficult. it's not easy to make money online as a media platform, and print, obviously, that was difficult. So in that sense, everyone's just scrambling to make sure that, they can produce a product that, the people want, and, that can be paid for, and that people can earn money, and, it gets supported without collapsing. And I guess there's that aspect of it. And so in that regard, I understand why a lot of the food media, particularly consumer press, is light. I guess it's light. It's and there's some extraordinary food writers in this country, like that's and people working on these magazines, and and whether it's the appetite of consumers, whether they only want to sort of dip their toes in a little bit, or whether it's making sure that they remain viable. I think it's a combination of all those things. The discussion of food in this country certainly is not as in depth as perhaps I would enjoy. And, not everyone wants to, dive into the deep blue like I do, but certainly as a writer, I like that. And it's funny, like I've written for so many magazines, and obviously a lot of food titles. But in recent years, the longest form of journalism that I've written is for magazines that are outside the category, that are luxury magazines or something, and they want a 6 or 7 page feature on tuna farming or the history of Botaga, or these sort of things. And I just love sinking my teeth into that sort of stuff. And it's often the food magazines that sort of don't want to go as in depth as that, which I find strange.
Yeah, well, it's funny. The luxury magazines give you the luxury of word length and really digging into a topic. But I don't know how many luxury magazines are going to be refloating after this. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I guess in this podcast you have been able to go pretty deep, haven't you? And you've had the luxury of it being your own platform, so you could really do what you wanted and yeah, really let people tell their stories and help them shape them.
Yeah, I know. I guess that's pretty bloody dangerous as well. Because, we didn't actually know what this series was going to be. And, Rob Locke, who is the producer and an incredible individual, and, he's hovering around in the background here listening to us, and he'll hate me saying this sort of stuff, but he is a genius. And, this was, basically his idea in a way. We were working on a project which will see light actually pretty soon, which is quite exciting. But that got paused because of the pandemic for a little while, and we were having a chat, and we were talking about that article that I had written that had such an impact, and Rob just said, we should just do it as a podcast. Like, let's just do it right now. Like, let's just get onto it. And this is an opportunity to, give voice to people who need it. And, this is the moment, and it's weird. It kind of felt like it was, and I mean, and to be fair, I mean, it's become far more successful than I think either of us thought. And we didn't know what it was going to be. We just sort of thought, well, okay, what do we do? And truly, I mean, you've been interviewed. I think I rang you that morning and said, do you want to be on? And then 3 hours later we were recording, and you had no idea what I was going to ask you. And we did that with Neil Perry, and I just said, can we have a chat? And he said, yep. And I kind of didn't know what I was going to ask him. He didn't know what I was going to ask him. And it just sort of happened. And I think the series has just been therapy, certainly for me. And
well, it felt like a lifeline, when it started for me. It was I felt like I'd been waiting for it to happen, and then suddenly it was there, and thank goodness it was, because this is what I needed. And I think it's really been it's given people a real collective feeling. And I've known some of the people that you've spoken to. I haven't known all of them, but it's felt like, these people are all part of my food family now. Yeah. And I'm sure that's what it feels like for so many people listening. So how did you decide who to talk to?
Yeah, that's really tough, because to be honest, we've just been making it up as we go. and just, and there's actually, and I apologize to anyone out there, and there's quite a few of you, and I'm thinking of you right now, that I've said, we're going to get you on and I want you to tell your stuff, your story. And then, like there's actually been so many of them that, you just can't do it, and unless, we recorded 5 episodes a day or something, and that's the scary thing about this situation, is there's so many stories, and it hasn't actually been difficult to find a story. It's just kind of lining someone up, because everyone's got something to say, because the scale of it is so epic. And I guess sort of along the way, we've sort of been mindful, I get in some ways, that, look, we need to get another producer on, or, we need to get a perspective of a sommelier. And, like then it was kind of like, we need to get Dani on because like she's doing extraordinary things. And so there are instances where we realize, okay, that person, we need to speak to that person. Other times, we just go on a gut instinct, and then we speak to someone and they just tell the most extraordinary story, and we have great plans for this, and a lot of hope for it. And I guess it'll just become what it is, because, we certainly haven't lassoed it and tried to make it be something, that we want it to be. We've just let it be. And I think in some ways that's been the sort of underlying its success.
So it didn't have a purpose, so to speak. It just was something you just felt like you needed to be doing. You just pushed, and someone put a captain's bib on you and pressed record.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it's funny, and this is the first time I've done a podcast series, and I'm a writer. I try and dabble in the other forms of media, but certainly my voice is pretty shaky early on in the series, and it's certainly got a lot better thanks to some training from Rob. But it's been bloody awesome, Dani. Like I'm just loving it. Like I can't wait to speak to the next person. Although today I was really horrified and nervous about doing this. But
yeah, I'm pretty scary, right? And how are you going with it? Are you okay?
Look, I've already said more than I wanted to, but
good. That's what I was planning.
But that's why we've got you here, though, because the chat I had with you, I kind of didn't want it to end, because I've said to you on the phone, like, you get it, and that's an important thing. When people are going through trauma, which I don't feel like I am in this pandemic, which I know is a really weird thing to say. If anyone puts their hand up to help, it feels massive. And I guess, at being voices in the industry, although I'd lost my voice in sort of print form, we could do it. And so if you can, I don't know, I just feel like if you can help, then you should, and
yeah.
So I guess that's just been that's kind of what's driven it, is just, and like Rob's energy is pretty intoxicating. Like he's
a good guy.
He never says no. Like he's just like, let's do it. Okay, let's record now. Okay, I can do. Like it's almost like there's 5 Robs and he's always available to do it.
He's in Sydney, right?
And to
Rob's in Sydney.
Rob's in Sydney, yeah. I haven't actually seen him for well, that's a funny thing. Like I'm in Canberra, he's in Sydney. I haven't seen Rob for a couple of months, and yet we speak, 8 times a day. It's bloody weird.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of us have got those pandemic friends where it's like you feel so close, but you just don't see each other. So when I do an interview, if I know, I'm going to write up an interview, it's like, as I'm asking the questions, I'm sort of hearing the quotes that I'm going to use, and I'm looking for a start and a finish and, some sort of through line, and that guides me a little bit in how I ask the questions. Can you talk about the different ways that you would interview someone for a written piece and for your podcast?
Oh, gee, that's interesting. Wow. Well, one thing that is very different is that when I interview someone for an article, I probably interject and make comments too much because I feel like they've said something and I want to sort of go down that track a bit, and it feels very much more interactive. And one thing that I've learned doing this, and that's thanks to Rob, is that the more silent I am as a host, often the more someone might reveal to you. And I've had to learn that, and it's really hard to bite your tongue because you want to jump in. And but when you do jump in, and certainly in this format, sometimes you might miss something that they're about to say that could be the best thing that they're going to say. Here, in this instance, you're sort of trying to lead and guide the conversation or steer it, but allowing someone to talk. Whereas interviewing for an article, I'm kind of trying to find and investigate something. I guess, I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, no, it really does. Because I guess with a podcast, it's like you're opening up a space and there's a beginning and there's an end, and together you fill it. Whereas when you're interviewing someone for something that you're going to write later on, it's, like they're an instrument in this thing that you're going to wrangle. And, like we said earlier, it's like you're going to honour them and they're going to hopefully feel like you've reflected them fairly, but it's a very different process.
Yeah, it is. And both of them are equally enjoyable, for similar reasons. It's just the approach is different. And I guess certainly early on in this series, I was more gung-ho, writer, Huck. And now I wouldn't say I've learnt to put the brakes on a bit, but I'm certainly a bit better than I was at the beginning of the series.
I'm sure you're going to find it hard to single out episodes, but are there any that you want to point to as particularly surprising, or conversations that really went in a different direction to what you expected?
Oh, gee, that's hard. I've got something out of every episode. There are episodes that, I liken it to, I think they're all great episodes, and I think everyone have something to say, but it's like great albums that there's a moment in your life, and so you remember that album. And whenever you hear that album, it reminds you of that time, and although this has been a 4 or 5, 6 week period, these podcasts kind of feel like that because the days feel like years. And so it's kind of like moments, but certainly early on, Jared Ingersoll's one made me realise the scale of the impact on the industry, and it made me realise perhaps what was ahead for this podcast series and the damage that was going to be made pretty evident on the industry. Certainly, and we've spoken separately about this, certainly your episode had an impact on both Rob and I for various reasons. And that's and that's probably why you're here as well. And I think, like Vicky Wilde was one for me that, I know Vicky quite well, that I get quite emotional listening to because I think she's just absolutely brilliant. And the things she said about restaurants resonate with me. And same with Chris Morrison, actually. That sort of, I'm not missing food in restaurants. And as a food journalist, in the food media, the focus is generally on chefs and food. And having restaurants ripped away like that, I mean, I'm a pretty handy cook. So I'm not missing the food, and not at all, actually. I mean, there's things I would like to go and eat cooked by chefs. I'm missing being in a restaurant. I'm missing the generous hospitality. I'm missing feeling that, like you've walked in someone's, front door of their house and they've welcomed you in and given you a hug,
Yeah, I'm really missing that as well. I think at the start, the first few episodes, or maybe the first couple of weeks, and what is time? Who knows? Was it 10 years ago? But the first few episodes of your podcast, it felt like we were all just like in the ocean, like the ship had wrecked and we were bobbing around, and you were just hoping, like, as the waves tossed you around, you'd see somebody else clinging onto a log, like a little way over. That's what the first episodes felt like for me, where it was just like, oh yeah, signs of life. Like people are out there, they're paddling madly as well. And then as it went on, I guess people started to have a little bit more breathing room and start to think about the future and coming out the other side and all the massive questions that poses. So you've obviously felt like this is time to call series 1 to a close. Can you say why you think that and what you think series 2 is going to feel like?
Well, it's a good question. And it's certainly, I guess, season 1 is kind of the crisis, I guess, in a way. And given the government's announcement of the 3 stages and, this attempt to open up our society again and open up the industry, I guess Rob and I saw it as certainly not the end of the crisis, that's for sure, but a change in it. The change of, restaurants who feel that they can open may. Others, I think we'll see a lot of them hold on and wait for stage 3 if they can. But I think we just saw it as, okay, this is a chance to sort of not necessarily tell different stories, because I think this is just an ongoing crisis that is people are starting to look through COVID. Certainly you can hear the voices in people through the series change, and as you were saying, they become more reflective and insightful, and they're looking at the things that were wrong with the industry and then thinking, what can they change? And I guess this decision by the government, whatever you think of it, as absurd as some of it is, it marks a change in what we're going through, in the sense that it's allowing the industry to slowly open up. And I guess we saw it as, as a change for us in the series that, okay, the crisis was this, and now whatever is going to emerge from it, that's what we need to start recording, I guess.
So get out your crystal ball then and just tell me about the restaurant landscape. What do you think we're going to see over the next months?
I won't lie to you. I think it's going to be brutal, and I think it's going to be beautiful. I think it's going to be both. I think it's going to be like, I can't wait to sit in a restaurant again and, with my wife, sit at a bar or something. Hopefully we can get some babysitters. That'll be nice. But certainly makes the restaurant experience easier. But having said that, they do love dumplings, and it's a great family experience. I'm very much looking forward to that again. I think the reality is that it's going to be hard for restaurants, and the positive to come out of that is that, they're going to have to go back to basics. And, I'm not a big fan of, smears, foams and skid marks and that whole kind of culinary world, although I do respect it when someone is bloody good at it. What I do love is a piece of fish on a plate that's been cooked beautifully, or an amazing salad, or, great produce cooked simply, and an environment where I'm comfortable, where I can wear jeans and a Metallica shirt and know that I'm welcome, and, and just enjoy the company and the feeling of being part of a community and part of a society. And I think that what we're going to see from restaurants is going back to that core of, treating each other, like family, of looking after you and just delivering really beautiful, honest food. But having said that, for restaurants to survive in this first period, I think we're going to see some really crazy things happen. I think we're going to see restaurants that have never done a tasting menu before doing tasting menus because they can only put 10 people in the room. And if they're going to open their doors, they need to get revenue in. So, and a way to do that is to do a tasting menu so they know their food costs to the cent. There's no food wastage. They know what the spend is going to be, which will be higher. So I think you're going to see some restaurants doing some really weird stuff that you would never have expected from some restaurants. But as we kind of open up, I think we're going to see some beautiful old school hospitality.
All that depends on diners trusting the restaurant environment. I'm sure we are all looking forward to experiencing that hospitality, but diner confidence is going to be such a big part of the way the future rolls out. Where do you see that?
Yeah, it's, I was talking to my wife about that yesterday, and it's interesting, isn't it? Like, will people rush out to restaurants? Will they take their time? Will they be nervous about it? And I sort of, I said to her, well, these people are just ignoring the social distancing rules throughout this whole process. So, but she said, are they going to be the ones going to restaurants though? And who knows? Like, it's a really good point. I don't know as a society how long it's going to take us to get over the mental scarring of this, and not the scarring in the sense that, of the horrific death tolls and all of that sort of stuff, the trust in our community that we can engage at a really human level with each other again, that, shake someone's hand when you walk up to them, give them a hug, give them a kiss, hello, that sort of where that is normal again. I don't know when that is. I hope it's soon because I don't mind a good hug. And, I hope that it's soon, and the sooner it happens, the better off restaurants are going to be.
Yeah, I really hope it's soon as well. But I think we can count on you to guide us through it, to tell us the stories, to find the people, to share those stories with us. So Huck and Rob, congratulations on an amazing Series 1 of Deep in the Weeds. And I cannot wait to hear when Series 2 drops, because I think we need you to help us through the next stage. Thank you so much.
That's really, you just got me upset. Look, it's not the first time I got upset during this conversation, but thank you, Dani. And season 2 is actually going to drop on Monday, funnily enough. We don't muck around here at Deep in the Weeds. But
hang on. I'm going to give you back the wheel for a minute. So here it is, just passing the wheel from Melbourne to Canberra, and you can have your podcast back for a moment.
No. This is your episode, but it will start next week, and we don't know what it's going to be like, but we hope that it's filled with such hope and joy and honesty that these incredible people have delivered so far, because, gee, I don't know, I needed it, and judging by the response, a lot of people have as well. And bloody thank you, Dani, for doing this. Like, yeah, I wasn't sure if you'd say yes, but geez, for someone who's done far more than Rob and I have for the industry in this period, like, you're amazing, and we are very grateful that you're signing off the last episode of season 1 for us.
Well, now you've embarrassed me, and I don't think I've done that much, but it's just whatever's come across my vision. I think we're all just doing what we can, because we all want to be back in restaurants, eating that beautiful piece of fish, hugging bloody everyone around us, and clinking glasses. So whether we do that virtually, then let's hope we'll do it soon in person. Thank you for getting deep in the weeds.
Awesome. Thanks, Dani.
Thanks, Huck.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Stay safe, isolate and be well.